Hello, my name is Courtney DiMare, and I am a recent MFA from the University of North Texas with a focus in metalsmithing and jewelry. And this is a presentation of my thesis research and its exhibition, Mostly Covered. This exhibition consisted of 7 clothing and jewelry hybrids. The initial idea for this work came to me through reflection of Howard Rosati's A Theory of Craft, where he defines a craft object as something that contains, covers, or supports. With jewelry not fitting into these distinctions, I started to wonder, what functions would jewelry need to perform to function as, or possibly replace, clothing? I have chosen the neck as my primary anchor to the body. It was comforting to know I could call them necklaces while also having plenty of real estate to use while exploring different ways of covering. The neck allows the piece to act as a necklace that hangs, covers, and supports the chest or functions as a bodice. This style of work drapes precariously and captures the motions of jewelry while the metal constricts the body to avoid displaying a concealed body part. To construct this work, I start to press and wrinkle copper foil to fit the curves of my body. For context, the foil I am using is thicker than aluminum foil. To rip it with your hands, you would need to start with a pair of scissors, and then you could easily continue the rip. This process also allowed me to explore texture in a more strategic way. I had been wrinkling copper foil for years, but now the wrinkles spoke to the visual transformation of material and began to reference fabric. Since the metal is so thin, I was worried about preserving the shapes and the wrinkles created in the molding process. I wanted it to feel more substantial because I feel that heavy jewelry is important jewelry. So I turned to electroforming. Electroforming is a process that uses electric conductivity to eat away from a donor copper plate and then fuses that removed material onto my piece. This process locked my wrinkles in place and left soft, bubbly edges, transforming the copper to resemble fabric. This look became the main feature of my work. While seeking hybridity, I had to consider other variables. When finishing a piece, I ask myself if the style of it is leaning more towards clothing or jewelry. I tend to use color as a way to balance the two. For pieces that are heavily referencing clothing, I use silver and gold to bring back a metallic look. Pieces that have enough jewelry references usually end up black or white to unify the form monochromatically. With this work, I am constantly confronted with the female body and my feelings towards having one. I noticed this most during the documentation process. Since I was asking if jewelry could function as clothing, I felt that the work had to be photographed without other clothing beneath it. I quickly realized what pieces and pictures that I was uncomfortable with other people seeing. But I found this concerning. If the work wasn't functional without something under it, was it actually a hybrid? For clarity on this subject, I started to look at other artist hybrids. Dia Wang takes on the hybrid by combining both jewelry and clothing materials to create wearables that can function as both. For example, in Pearl Drip, Wang uses a white collared shirt and replaces the sleeves with strands of pearls. This evolves the shirt into a jewelry hybrid, but Wang's take on the hybrid is so literal. There is a fusion happening between recognizable, separate elements. Wang's hybrids do not mesh on an aesthetic level. The material choices juxtapose cloth and metallic objects, becoming referential to both ideas, but not synergistic. Design house Schiaparelli is producing metal tops that are accepted in public. My favorite part about them is that it's covering the body with the same body parts. which begs the questions, why is it okay to wear metal nipples out in public, but not fleshy ones? It's been a perfect thought experiment on my topics of revealing, concealing, and hybridity. My conclusions were that the purpose of a hybrid isn't that the object functions as both or neither. Instead, it is about creating something new that resides in ambiguity. I considered how the work changes when it is worn over clothing. Instead, it becomes another layer of metal that covers the sensitive areas, offering a sense of protection and possibly wears like modern armor. When the work is worn as a replacement to clothing, it's more precarious, providing coverages through the whims of the natural movements of the body. Ultimately, it comes down to the wearer and their intentions. Do they feel like revealing or concealing today? To this date, the only wearer has been me, and my feelings are often conflicting on this topic. As a woman, I have often felt vulnerable in my own skin because of the expectations and exploitations of the female body that I find hypocritical and problematic. I was sexualized from a very young age, and this has caused a complicated relationship with my body. I find myself conflicted with how to present myself. Should I be modest with my adornment to avoid attention? Or should I be like the other girls who are proud of their bodies and exhibit myself to celebrate female empowerment? I think that the ambiguity of the hybrid and the different ways of wearing the work allow me to explore both avenues. I use historical motifs and references in this work, mostly because I enjoy the elaborate decoration and the silhouettes, but also because I see some irony. Women who are sexually assaulted are often blamed for their choice of clothing, as if what they are wearing invited the unwanted advances. Victorian women were very much covered up, but that didn't necessarily make them any safer. I am highly sentimental, particularly with dresses. Each dress in my wardrobe is connected to the multiple memories that were experienced while wearing it. I think about the energies of life resting within the crevices of the woven material. This gives each garment value and makes it difficult to part with. This love for dresses and garments is why this work looks so much like bodices, because it's the wearables that I treasure the most. My personal clothing plays a significant role in this work. The lace patterns in this series are scanned from my wardrobe. I have used these scans for tracing purposes, and in some cases, printed them directly onto a piece. Using lace with memories associated with it add an extra layer of personalization and preservation. I am a collector of things. I don't think my work is about collecting. I'd even be skeptical to say that collecting is an important part of my process. But one collection of mine that has had a significant influence over this body of work is my collection of vintage wedding dresses. It's weird. I have the hardest time finding contemporary clothes that fit me, but when I go into a thrift store, I usually can find a wedding dress that fits me perfectly. This dress in particular has been very influential. I spent a lot of time last semester deep diving into any possible history of this dress. I believe it was made in the 1880s, but I have no idea by who. I don't think it was made by a professional. Everything I know about it is what I can see and touch. I am drawn to the sheer and delicate quality of the material. Off the body, it looks like tattered rags, but on the body it comes to life. The jacket's vertical columns of lace and shirring hug and accentuate the torso from the back and lead into material that calls for a bustle. The flowy material in the front and around the neck have influenced several of my pieces. I have the tendency to refer to my work as a she once they are finished, worn, and photographed. Like us, objects live a life cycle. They are conceptualized, created, and supplemental to our lives. They experience wear and reflect the passage of time on their surface. Some even break and crumble beyond repair. Each has a personality. Was she difficult and sassy during the creation, or did she come together effortlessly? Is she bright and attention-demanding, or subtle and shy? Is she popular and well-received, or the ugly duckling that no one ever wants to exhibit? These factors impact my relationship to each piece. I am sentimental about their creation and the journey we took together. This mindset leads me to treasure whatever final outcomes happen in the work. When thinking about these pieces as if they have personalities, I think it's fascinating how the making process feels a lot like the wearing. There's a push and pull with the materiality in its relationship to the body. The metal is forced and pushed against my body to take on its form. The body influences and dominates the metal. The process of electroforming transforms the metal from soft and malleable to dense, coarse, and sturdy. It also changes the shape, form, and size. This transformation, along with additional growths and spurs that form, changes the wearability. Suddenly, the roles are reversed. Now, the work starts to have dominance over the body. The garment, once forced to take on its shape, is now pinching and forcing the body to fit it. The edges can be sharp. The growths of copper have made the original pressing smaller. High collars force the neck into a certain position. The work now has agency over the body, yet performs for it. This piece, breastplate, is a perfect example. I loved this piece before I electroformed and enameled it. But she needed more time in the bath, and I was in a rush, so she slumped in the kiln, and now I have to do a hunched back, America's Next Top Model kind of pose in order for it to lay flat against my chest. If I was to describe her personality, I would call her stubborn, manipulative, because she only does her job one way, and I have to change to fit her. The bandeau necklace was my initial reaction to the idea of a necklace functioning as a top. And it functions very well, comfortably covering the chest even while the body moves. The collar was initially made for something else that didn't suit it. Enameling this work was tricky, with the same potential problems as the last piece. The collar either slumped in or the extra layer of enamel made it smaller, but not to the point where it's unwearable. It has to be carefully wiggled on, and it's so tight that it holds the neck without any additional support. I'm sure this sounds uncomfortable, but I am very satisfied with how it fits. Historical clothes weren't very comfortable, and beauty is pain. As this piece ages, the enamel is chipping off the high points of the wrinkles, leaving exposed copper that is now oxidizing and turning blue. This change now makes me think of a short passage of deeply evocative language from a one-act play translated from French for Susan Heiner's Accessories to Modernity. The passage reads, "My heart beat as I stood up to look over them, and I was entirely captivated by a bosom modestly covered with gauze, perfect in roundness, and bluely veined as it lay softly bedded in lace frills." Necklace, the most well-received piece that I've made to date. While designing this piece, I was thinking about the neck and its coverings. I reflected about how, in the past, the neck was not on display like it is today. I reflected on the idea of how a highly modest dress can make the body feel more erotic and sentimental because of how rarely it is displayed. The neck, a body part we barely think twice about, becomes a sensual connector for mind and body. This is why I wanted this piece to feel intimate, soft, and romantic. The lace patterns are from outfits I wore from significant occasions in my marriage. The result was a romantic and sensual piece that unintentionally speaks to the stages of my relationship with my husband. Historically, lace was preserved by Frankensteining it with other laces into new garments. I find this very fitting because I constructed necklace by stitching many different laces together, but also because of the reconstruction and resuscitation that took place after an electroforming mishap, where my original stitches and construction disintegrated in the acid bath. At times, I am shocked but thrilled that this piece is still standing. Gold ruffle is a hodgepodge of different textile inspiration. As with necklace, I was still interested in the cravat and the other neck coverings, and the challenge of creating its softness, volume, and wearability in metal. While this piece started as one long strand that was then shaped around the neck, it ended up being my most detailed work to date. A lot of the visual language came from Dennis Bruna's Fashioning the Body, which is a collection of shapewear through the ages. The bodice pulls imagery from stomachers and corsets while referencing medieval dress with cross-stitching along the side panels. The neck has an extended rosebud collar that pays homage to Elizabethan collars with a modern twist. Gold and silver finishing wax were used to balance the scales between clothing and jewelry. The motifs in this piece are closely tied to clothing, yet the ability to put it on over the head and its materiality are the main elements holding this piece to jewelry. This piece is the most comfortable to wear. The weight is evenly distributed and does not crowd the neck. When I wear this piece, I feel regal. The only sleeve in my collection is the epitome of extra, which is why I titled it Extra Sleeve. It rests on one shoulder and drapes down the arm while slightly hugging it. The cuff of the sleeve is flared, leaving the fingers exposed. For inspiration, I was looking at Lydia Edwards' How to Read a Dress. I am drawn to the leg of mutton sleeves popular in fashion between 1890 and 1900 because they make such an eye-catching statement. This style of dress has a large poof on the shoulder and a thin tapered sleeve ending at the knuckles. The challenge of recreating this look in metal intrigued me. When making the actual poof of the sleeve, I was able to embrace the qualities of metal to create volume without the need to stuff the form from the inside. Multiple golden and copper tones were used to finish this piece to further convey its excessive ornamentation. The way the body conforms to this piece, particularly the way the arm falls slightly behind the body, conveys triumph, grandeur, and strength. Its orientation on one shoulder and attachments that go around the neck gave the piece a military aesthetic. I find this fitting since I have been thinking increasingly about how these pieces speak to empowerment and protection. Ironically, wearing this piece will make one arm and hand unusable, and was inspired by an attempt to make a metal jewelry glove that would also limit the wearer's abilities. Truthfully, I've become accustomed to working on a larger scale, which is why the sleeve replaced the glove, while the wearer may not be able to fight back. Hopefully their adornment is aggressive enough to not have to. Stomacher explores a new process and material. Instead of making lace by cutting patterns out of copper sheet with an X-Acto knife, I used a 3D pen which extrudes warm polylactic acid, more commonly known as PLA, to create form. Then I sandblasted the plastic to give it enough texture to have a conduit material such as graphite or copper paint to stick to it. This allowed me the opportunity to grow copper through electroforming onto a plastic substrate. I saw a lot of potential with this process, and I would go on to use it several more times. The amount of depth and detail that I could render was exciting. Stomachers were the decorative front panel of a corset and usually pinned into place to cover the stays. They were considered both clothing and jewelry, often being made with both fabric or metal. Translating the stomacher into an oversized brooch felt fitting to its historical context. My favorite part of this piece is that it is coated with a fine white glitter, which complements the granular nature of the copper deposits from electroforming. While this piece wears differently than the others, it is still relevant to the series with its historical references and process. This piece fits more like a garment than a hybrid. The fusion between pendant and bodice manifests through connections holding it to the body, leading to the title body cuff. The back is much more activated than in previous work. The straps allow for a tighter connection to the body that provide the highest level of coverage. Without the straps, this piece still adequately hugs the body and is supported by the ribs. This exciting feature almost led to the title Rib Hugger, because without the back straps, I imagined it would fit like hip hugger pants. After a couple steps, it would need to be pulled back up. But the idea of a cuff worked with the fit and also spoke more to hybridity. It is made with the same process that I developed making stomacher. I used the 3D pen to create a visual language of stitched embroidery into copper mesh. This piece is finished with liver sulfur and gold paint on the high points. I have tried to recreate the magic that happened with this piece, but I am at a loss. How does something go so perfectly twice and then never happen again? As much as I appreciate that this piece exists, I cannot help but feel a little bitter for its teasing me with the taste of a process that I cannot count on or control. My next attempts will use a copper-infused PLA in hopes that it'll perform better. I've had this copper PLA since February. It is now June, and I still have not bothered to try. This piece was also responsible for the custom carved dress forms used in the exhibition. The rest of the collection would have fit well enough on stock mannequins, but this piece is so tailored to me that it wouldn't fit on anything but a body carved custom for this purpose. I went on to sculpt 5 out of the 7 dress forms to fit their respective pieces, so each would have an ideal display. I think that this will become part of the practice. Each piece will have its own carved dress form. The 19th century wedding dress in my collection has directly influenced pieces like gold ruffle, breastplate, and necklace. Each has a subtle essence of the dress, but I wanted to make a piece that referenced it more directly and could possibly be the conclusion. The dress is delicately constructed using panels of lace and tapered shirring that control the way it hugs the body. To capture this effect in metal, I folded and cut the copper into tapers that move around the torso. Truth is, this piece doesn't satisfy the ending I was looking for. The soft, delicate, and seemingly effortless nature of the wedding dress translates into hard, aggressive armor and metal. This transformation is something I am usually very proud of, but for some reason, not with this piece. Since this is my most recent work, I am still unsure how I feel about it. I tend to sit with a piece for years before I know exactly what it is about. This is why I have had progressively less and less to say as I've gone through this presentation. As I look to the future, I am excited for its many possibilities. I expect my studio practice will evolve and that I will continue to experiment and explore new ways of making. I like to push material to do things it's not supposed to do, and I get lucky a lot. Lucky, or I have failed so many times that I have an excellent understanding of what to expect and how to work it to my advantage. With this approach, I have learned to embrace failure, Each piece I create leads to a better understanding of my process and creates a new set of problems to work through and solve. I don't expect each piece I make to be a masterpiece. In fact, some of my work falls apart before I can even share it. I strongly believe in the idea of work makes work, and not just the obvious act of working. My studio practice is fueled by the piece before. I learn something from each piece that I apply to the next. As long as I am making something, I am moving forward, and something better will eventually come from it. I'm grateful for my studio practice, for teaching me about myself and my personal narrative. If I continue this series for the rest of my life, it will at the very least act as a memoir of my changing body and the life it lived. The romanticism of the object and its sentimental beginnings will come full circle. I trust my practice. As I continue to work with metal, I will continue to grow as an artist. I believe that making artwork does not answer questions, it creates them. Thank you for listening.